Hi, I'm Ed Amoroso from Tag Cyber, and I'm sitting with my friend Francis Cianfrocca, who is the founder and CTO of Bayshore Networks. Did I get that right, Francis?
You sure did, Ed, as always.
It's great to see you.
Always great to be with you.
You betcha. Hey, IoT, industrial control, OT, this is your area?
Yep.
So can you give us in a short sentence? No, just
I
kidding.
don't do short sentences.
All right, we can do it in
we
a
can do
few
it in
paragraphs.
bite-sized chunks, right? Short paragraphs.
How do you protect industrial control devices from cyber attacks? What's the approach?
Yeah. So the general approach with industrial systems, and we use this term OT, to distinguish from IT. It's operational technology. That's the stuff that industrial companies use to make cars and make gasoline and make electricity. The machines that they use, they're always been automated. They're computerized. They use the same kinds of networks. The issue now that you get is that people are connecting these environments back to IT systems because of the data. The data is incredibly valuable, and there's a revolution in data going on in the world, and the industrial people want to participate. So now you've got all the apertures that are coming from the IT side and security risks, and you over a long career know a lot about how to protect IT assets. When you talk about protecting OT assets from similar threats, it's a totally different story because they were never designed for that kind of.
It used to be they were out of band, different protocols, different everything.
They still are different protocols.
But there's an interoperability now that creates the concern.
There's a convergence, I would say. I would say the people who run industrial plants, production systems, be they within factories or spread out all over, electric power grid. All right, they think in terms of isolation. That's how they're your question was, how do you secure them?
Right.
They think in terms of isolation and segmentation. Very, very sound, important approach. But as soon as you got network connectivity back to IT and even to cloud-based services, you've got openings for viruses and malware and other kinds of stuff, right? That for which I think of it sometimes like, the conquerors from Europe coming to the New World, bringing viruses that there was no immunity to.
Yeah.
You think about it, that's pretty much what's going on. And to protect it, I think, you think about how to protect IT environments, it's all about policing boundaries. What's a firewall? Firewall is a boundary you put up around a piece of cyberspace, and then you police the boundary. Anything on the outside, and you do things like making sure you know who's coming in, not just what they're doing. When you do the same thing doesn't work. That approach doesn't really work for OT. What I like to think of is whitelisting transactions. I like to think of making sure that you have controls over what can be done, all right, in those environments. And that's a very different approach, which, by the way, wouldn't work for IT because they're just too disparate. There's just too much functionality. But if you look at OT, there's so much vulnerability to remote commands that you can't firewall. I mean, you think about a machine that's like a robot. You send it a command that's perfectly legitimate. It's what it's supposed to be doing, but you send it at a moment when there's a man standing next to it. You see the issue. And so you need a much more domain-specific protective policy. And that it's different. And I have to say that the practice around doing this, IT security has professional practitioners, best practices, performance metrics. You know how to measure what you're doing. None of that exists in OT cyber yet, and we're at the beginning of figuring that out.
A lot of people watching think of IT security as protecting data, meaning I've got my customer records, sensitive data, blah blah blah, and use encryption and other things to stop that. Is OT more about integrity of operation?
Yes.
I think more about a wind turbine going nuts because a hacker versus stealing telemetry from a wind turbine. Kind of who cares? Am I thinking about that right?
I would
Maybe somebody
say
does care. I would think it would have less street value than.
It's an interesting point of view, and I would say that there are three. First thing at the top of the list, which is most of it, is safety.
Of the threat list.
of the things that you're trying to protect.
Got it. Okay.
Safety. And then underneath that would be process integrity, which you mentioned.
Yeah.
Okay, making sure the wind turbine doesn't go nuts. I mean, you want to make sure the wind turbine doesn't burn out and throw sparks when somebody's standing next to it.
When you say safety, you mean hacker sitting somewhere and then someone dies as a result, like
or the environment is degraded, or you produce, environmental effects.
Okay, I got it.
Safety is top of mind, really top of mind for anybody who runs any kind of physical process. And just underneath that is process integrity. Okay, underneath that there is a notion of machine telemetry is valuable. And I can tell you, I make a distinction here because we've had the case. Just imagine you're a company that uses robots to make things, cars, for example. Okay, you would have a great deal of interest in allowing the company that makes your robots to get their hands on the robot so they can do predictive maintenance. You want them to get a certain amount of telemetry aggregation from that space. What you don't want them to do is to figure out how many cars you're making per hour. That's incredibly sensitive, and people care about that a great deal. So that leads to another kind of protective posture, which is subset the data. I'm going to allow telemetry aggregation from my environment, from my industrial environment, but I want to specify which data points go out and which don't.
That makes sense.
All right.
So you see all these botnets that are coming out with IoT and industrial components as the host for the bot software?
Oh yeah.
Is that what's up with that? Is that a vector that just is natural extension of what you're talking about?
I think that when you talk about the IoT, and this is a term, it's a buzzword that's evolving. It used to mean consumer devices, and if you think about, and you know this, all the routers. The Wi-Fi routers that are hundreds of millions of them out there that are incredibly vulnerable. I think the term is starting to mean more industrial devices, and people in the industrial internet talk about edge devices. What they mean is small devices that are somewhat ruggedized. They're industrial devices. You plug them into 24 volt power instead of 120 volts. Okay, they are industrial devices, but they sit at what we call the Purdue stack, right, at a relatively high Purdue level. The production environments, the control loops where the machines are a lower level, and then there's this edge level where there are devices that people are very interested in collecting sensor data from.
SCADA?
SCADA is, again, another term of art.
Or is that a level above?
The SCADA can be at the edge, but that's not always the only thing there.
Got it.
The edge is kind of like a boundary layer between IT and OT.
Right.
And so, the vulnerabilities of those devices is not very well understood. Okay, people are thinking more of sensors. Because one of the big problems with not only IoT security, but just IoT in general, how do you get data out of those environments? Because that's the whole point, is to get the data out, right? So people are thinking very hard about sensors for industrial environments, and the security, you open up a pretty big vector there. If you've got like a low power Linux-based device that has numerous vulnerabilities in it, starting with it runs TCP/IP, right? And so the security issues there are pretty scary.
Yeah. Speaking of which, Ted Koppel wrote a book about a
Great
year
book.
ago.
You introduced me to that book.
I thought it was worth reading. It's Ted Koppel, right? It's not written by somebody you never heard of. Pretty rough book, right? Lays out some scenarios in the power industry that were kind of frightening.
Yes,
I've talked to people on one hand who would say, no, that's not going to happen. Like a lot of folks who work in the area.
Yes, indeed.
I feel like there are not only controls, but that there are sort of natural points of separation, both technology-wise and architecturally, that wouldn't allow the kind of cascaded threat that Ted Koppel kind of implies. But some of it seems feasible to me. Like the idea that you could destroy a transformer, through step voltage, just frying something.
It's been done.
Seems like you could do that, right?
It's been done.
Yeah, and I don't see an easy way to fix it. Kind of where are you on that spectrum where one end it's like, oh my gosh, dive under the bed, we're all in trouble.
Oh, no.
And the other end is, relax, nothing's going to happen. Kind of where's Francis Cianfrocca on that?
Well, we work quite a bit with electric power providers.
Yeah.
So, I'm kind of seeing it from the inside. And I will tell you, so I'm not at the dive under the bed stage. However, I will tell you...
Probably not also at the it's no big deal stage either, right?
No, it is important.
Yeah.
What I was going to say was there are plenty of people who run the assets, who run the SCADA systems, who run the IEDs and the substations and the transmission equipment. Very, very good at what they do. Okay, power is still flowing in the United States and around the world, and has been for 100 years plus. So they know what they're doing. They will tell you, no, we don't have a problem. They will tell you they have a problem with physical security, because a lot of those assets are out in, and you know this from your work in the telcos.
Open terrain.
And in closets that are in known locations. Buried, but the bad guys know where they are. You do worry about physical security because that's an aperture. Is the grid itself vulnerable to a cascading cyber attack? So I think that there's enough. I mean, here the principle of segmentation applies. Okay, there's enough. If you think about how the grid behaves in a blackout, okay, and the grid is pretty fragile, and that's a source of worry. I mean, there is more than likely a cyber vector or a cyber vulnerability that can cause a grid to take itself offline. But the way the grid works, as you know, if you, for instance, you lose a power line, a transmission line somewhere. This happened, here we are in New York City. Blackout affected New York City in 2003.
Right.
Power line went out in Ohio. It was a hot day. They sag. Okay, it's aluminum. It's steel core with aluminum wrapped around it. That's what a transmission line is. Sags in the hot weather. Tree falls on it, takes a line out. The rest of the grid can't rebalance itself because it's so close to capacity, and everything shuts itself off.
Yeah.
All the components of the grid take themselves offline, and you've got a shutdown. That's a fail-safe. Okay, so that kind of failure, it's possible to bring the grid back up. It takes time. You can't just flip switches. Everything has to come back up in a certain order. But Ted Koppel's scenario, is, and other people have talked about it, is there a scenario where the grid can come down and not come back?
Yeah.
And that I don't find
But here's
credible.
things that I worry about.
Yeah.
Like here's some conditions that seem to me true in electric power that are just worrisome. Number one, tremendous complexity. And you and I both know, we're a couple old guys, there's like a direct correlation between simplicity and security. It just are.
Yeah, there is.
If it's still complicated, I'm getting nervous. That's number one.
Yep.
Number two is that the attack vector of choice is to just break stuff. Like if we were going to attack a website, breaking it is not what we want. We want to get in, steal things. It's much
and
more
use it as a springboard
surgical,
to get somewhere
harder.
else.
It's more If it's just make stuff break, that's so much easier. So that's the second problem. Third thing that worries me is rapid, almost escalating connectivity, as you said, of IT and computers and networks to a bunch of stuff that's complicated. Put all of that together, it just worries me. Those are bad indicators. I don't think anybody in the industry would disagree with any of those things. They'd say they're controls, and I absolutely agree they're controls. I'm just saying those three things, the complexity and then denial of service and hooking up to networks. Traditionally, when you have those three things, it leads to a bad outcome.
So I would say that we have some known cases in the world where power systems, electric power systems, were successfully attacked.
Well, Ukraine,
Yeah, exactly right. Well, think about it. How were they attacked? What were the vectors? And this is something that's true throughout industry, not just electric power. You have computers, ordinary computers, most likely running back versions of Windows, all right, that have numerous cyber vulnerabilities, and they are accessible from the outside. And the vector isn't going to be a specific cyber attack against equipment. It's going to be plain old malware. So the same kind of malware that you can use to infiltrate any Windows machine.
And that was malware. So 0 days,
right.
Boom, took out.
Exactly right. And so once you have a compromised host that's in a SCADA network or it has access to a control network, you're in. I mean, you can do whatever you want. And the thing that scares me the most, all right, and I don't want to overplay what I'm about to say, okay? But those attacks have already taken place, and they are latent.
Yeah, right.
So the thing is, what I worry about is a moment of geopolitical tension, and an attack that has been planned and in place, and lying low right now could be triggered, and that worries me.
Hey, we got to get more positive here.
Yes, let's do that.
Let me ask you a fun question. Are you going to buy an autonomous car when they come out?
An autonomous car. I have an electric car. Okay.
Okay, that's
all right.
The first
now
step.
you have to understand something,
That's
right?
cool.
Okay, so Ed, you know, I'm a New Yorker, lived here in New York City for all my life, and never. I've in my pocket now. Because I just moved to Research Triangle a few months ago. In my pocket, I have a North Carolina learner's permit. Okay, so I just bought my very first car in my life, and it is the Chevrolet Volt, which is the electric, electric car. And would I buy an autonomous?
Just in time for it to go autonomous. You won't need to.
You know something? Autonomous. I would have guessed. Now I'm sure, because you think deeply about these things too. 5 years ago, or 10 years ago, I would have thought driving a car is a problem just deep enough, all right, that you couldn't automate it. Well, you can.
Of course you can.
A lot of stuff is like that.
Right.
Okay. There's some stuff surprisingly that isn't, but language processing, image recognition, the things that we use deep learning for, incredibly interesting. And what I find, you made a point a few weeks ago about deep learning, which for our listeners. It's like machine learning, as you know, but it's pretty new, about 2 years or so old, and it uses something called convolutional neural networks with backpropagation.
It's turbocharged machine learning.
It's multiple layer neural networks. That's why it's deep. It's not because it's mystical or mysterious. It's because it's more than one layer, and I think it has some novel applicability to security problems. But here's the thing about it is this. The beautiful thing, people have innovated so much in this area for image recognition, which again used to be a deep problem, okay? Here's what you can do with deep learning that really impresses me tremendously, okay? And I'm gonna take this back to edge computing we talked about a minute ago. With deep learning, you can construct a model, okay? And you can bake it, you can make it so small and so efficient, which wasn't possible before deep learning, okay? So that you can put it on a cell phone. A low power device that you can snap onto a rail, doesn't require a fan, okay, could potentially have a learned model in it. You could put that on a control loop, reading the network traffic, and now you've got a cyber sensor, okay, that can tell you when you have process integrity problems, you have machine failures, incipient failures, and cyber problems.
If you're willing to beacon up and down from the cloud, then you have unlimited capability in the cloud.
You do, but you don't have unlimited bandwidth from that environment.
No, it's true. It's true.
So you do some of the processing there.
If you needed to make a really hard decision, and it needed a lot of contextual information plus global information, like an autonomous vehicle can have a lot of intelligence on it.
Sure.
But the cloud could tell you where the storms are, where the traffic is, where there's a lot of things that can be computed and done. In concert with cloud. So back to the first question: are you going to be one? I'm trying to get at whether you're an early adopter.
Oh, I would totally drive the autonomous car. Wait a minute, I said that wrong. I'm not driving the autonomous car. I'll be in it. Absolutely.
But a lot of times when people do what you do and understand the detailed problems that exist in industrial control and OT, a lot of times, when you work in the back room of a restaurant. And then you say, "I'll never eat at a restaurant again." Do you have any of that fear, or do you feel like these OT
not with autonomous? Let me give you another example. Something that's there's something called positive train control. In the rail transport industry, this is a government mandate. So all the major.
So a guy crashed here in New York, right? He went around because he was going too fast.
That was Amtrak.
Was that Amtrak?
That was
They didn't have that. Or maybe it was a different issue.
No, it was an operator error, but the whole point of positive train control, and this is a large subject, okay? Our listeners can Google it and learn a lot about it, but it is a government mandate for the rail transport industry, and what it basically amounts to is a great big kill switch. Okay, and it involves a lot of communication between railroad trains, particularly locomotives, and wayside equipment using near field radio. Okay, so the goal is to prevent accidents like you had, the unfortunate accident that had fatalities. Okay, with the Amtrak, a couple of them incidents right down on that eastern corridor.
That's very cool.
So the thing is that your question was, would I would I be an early adopter?
Would you trust?
Yeah, I would. I've got enough analysis of the security, that they're doing a good job with it. They did something really remarkable with PTC. Okay, and I met some of the people that did this work. They said to themselves, okay, communications is brownfield. Okay, you're running trains all over mountain ranges and all kinds of geography all over the world. You don't have well-behaved, you don't have a wired network.
No.
You don't even have a wireless network that's particularly well-behaved. So they actually started from a pretty low level in the network stack and worked their way up. And they built security in at the message layer and at the application layer. That's novel. Most systems, most industrial systems are so legacy. All right, when you encounter them, the best you can do is say, that's what it is, it's not going to change. There's the IT/OT convergence, let's protect the interconnects. And that's the best you can do in a lot of environments. But with positive train control, they've actually done it in a much better way. And I think we've got a mutual
really
friend in the electric power industry that's thinking the same way.
Yeah. Hey, now that you're down in North Carolina, you come back up and see us every now and then?
Absolutely.
You promise to come up, we'll do some more.
We'll do this anytime you want.
I wish you well at Bayshore.
Absolutely.
And in all of your work. And really appreciate everything you do for our industry.
Thank you so much.
Such a delight to talk to you.
All right.
Great. Thanks,
Always
Francis.
great.
We'll see you next time.